Okay, so welcome everybody to the final author event of the Whatcom Reads series, Whatcom Reads 2022. My name is Claire. I'm the event coordinator for Village Books in Bellingham and Linden, Washington. And we're so glad to have you all here, to have our author here, our moderator. I'm so excited that we had a virtual event for folks who were not able to attend the in-person events for whatever reasons, geographical reasons, whatever reasons. So we're glad that you can join us today. Before we begin, if you have any questions for our author today, we do have the Q&A featured enabled at the bottom of your screen. So if you have questions, please pop those at any time in the Q&A. We're going to get to those towards the end of the event. Please try to use that rather than putting questions in the chat. I do welcome author engagement in the chat, but if you put your questions in the chat, sometimes they have a way of cycling up and disappearing, and we don't want to miss them. So use that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, please. I do want to state that the virtual readings gallery at Village Books is a safe space. Any user exhibiting offensive or inappropriate behavior will be dismissed from the event immediately. Thank you. We wish to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the ancestral homeland of the Nooksack and Lummi people. They have been its stewards since time immemorial, respecting the land, river, and ocean, with the understanding that everything is connected, related, and alive. Okay, and now just a little bit about Whatcom Reads. Greenwood is the 14th annual Whatcom Reads selection chosen by our Whatcom Reads steering committee to bring people from across Whatcom County together to read and discuss the same book. Members of the Whatcom Reads steering committee include representatives from the Bellingham Public Library, Bellingham Technical College, Northwest Indian College, Western Washington University, Whatcom Community College, Whatcom County Library System, and community partner Village Books. Whatcom Reads includes a variety of lead-up events to explore themes related to the featured book. And you can learn more about the Whatcom Reads series, as well as the related project Whatcom Writes at the website whatcomreads.org. We'd like to thank Allied Arts of Whatcom County for coordinating the Whatcom Reads Arts Challenge, and the Hotel Leo for putting up our author for a few days. This year, other partners included the North Cascades Institute, the Whatcom Million Trees Project, and the City of Bellingham. So we thank them for their participation and support. So this year, in addition to the stellar program of events, we produced this beautiful Whatcom Reads field guide. I have to hold it up right in front of me so that you can see it. Oh, right there. There it is. It's a field guide and journal with funding provided by Humanities Washington and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. We hope this field guide and journal enriches the reading experience and inspires readers to draw, write, and reflect on their time among the trees. And I would like to add the beautiful illustrations inside were created by former Village Books staffer and local artist, Kristen Lee Morse. We're very proud of her for her design. Okay, and now for the main event. First, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's conversation. Kelly Everett is a concert pianist and cellist, avid reader, mother, hiker, biker, explorer of the woods, and true nature lover. She has truly been forest bathing her whole life. She also happens to be co-owner of Village Books and Paper Dreams, and most importantly for today's event, one of the earliest and loudest champions of Greenwood. So welcome, Kelly.
Thank you.
And now for our guest of honor. Michael Christie's books include the novel If I Fall, If I Die, which was longlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, the Kirkus Prize, and was selected as a New York Times Editor's Choice pick and was on numerous Best of 2015 lists. His linked collection of stories, The Beggar's Garden, was also longlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, shortlisted for the Writers' Trust Prize for Fiction, and won the Vancouver Book Award. His essays and book reviews have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Globe and Mail. His latest novel, and the book we're here to discuss today, Greenwood, was longlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize. A former carpenter and homeless shelter worker, he divides his time between Victoria, British Columbia, and Galiano Island, where he lives with his wife and his 2 sons in a timber frame house that he built himself. Welcome, Michael Christie and Kelly Everett.
Hello, thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Kelly. Hi
Hi.
again.
Hello again. Wow, thank you so much for all that you've been doing this week. You've said yes to everything and you've gone everywhere. You've driven all over Whatcom County. So I just want to say thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a real, true pleasure to connect with readers in the county. So this is, it's been huge fun for me, especially after 2 years of not much fun.
That's true. So so this is the original arc that I have. So when so when I first saw the book, it was kind of like that Tony Maria point in West Side Story. I was I was at PNBA, a book conference, and I saw the book across the room, and everything went quiet. And I slowly walked across the room. I said to David Glenn, our rep, I want that book. Because it was, I mean, first of all, it's a beautiful cover, this original cover,
Yes.
and the trees, and it just sucked me in. And he said, he gave it to me, he said, you will love this book. I said, thank you. So that was my romantic start to this whole story. And then I started to read it, and wow, blown away. I mean, it's a large book. It's it covers 140 years of generational family rings, and it's set in the past, the present, for the most part, in the future. So wow, well done. I mean, I'm just going to go right for the big question of the day. And what gave you the idea for this book?
First of all, thank you. I just watched West Side Story with my kids, so I'm very that moment of recognition is very vivid in my mind. So thanks for that.
Yes.
Hopefully, your relationship with the book doesn't end as tragically as Tony and Maria's. But so, yeah, the idea for this book came first as some characters, as it usually does for me. I got a sense of some folks that I wanted to write about and realized fairly early on that they were members of the same family. And as you mentioned, this is an intergenerational story. There are 4 generations of the Greenwood family that are discussed in the novel and focused upon. And so, but I just was kind of, messing around with these characters and writing them with no real kind of overarching ideas until I was cutting down a tree on my property on Galiano Island to clear space for a driveway. And my son, I have 2 young sons, my sons were there, and it was kind of a big event, and the tree fell, and we were looking at the stump, and I realized that the tree itself was a kind of a record of its own life, and that the rings of the tree looked almost like pages. And I thought, what an interesting way to structure a story. And from that moment, the novel really took shape through this metaphor of the layers of history unfolding as the book went along.
Yeah, it's very well written. So this relationship with trees, it's kind of an interesting story. It's very similar. My father loved trees, and his brother, this family relationship, his brother, kind of a rich guy, he brought my dad over to his walnut orchard in Central California and said, so I know you've always liked orchards, walnut orchards. I just bought this. My dad got excited and he said, so I'm going to build condos on this land. So it's interesting how families relate to each other and how they relate to land. And then we're watching that now. Countries are fighting for land. It would go from huge countries to family to neighbors who fight over whose tree limb is over my property line. I don't know if this is more of a statement, but it's so interesting, this human fight that we have for for land. And I don't know if you can talk to that.
You're so right. And, a part of, I think a large theme of this novel is the idea of inheritance. And I did a lot of thinking around what is transmitted between generations. The good, things like love, support, the bad, things like trauma, things like genetic traits that may be unfavorable, but also things like wealth and things like land and the ownership of land, and particularly the resources that exist on that land are of critical importance to each generation of the Greenwood family. And especially, being a Canadian, living in a country whose entire economic system is based on resource exploitation and use, however you want to look at it. It became very clear to me that I was not just telling the story of a family, I was sort of telling the story of a place as well.
Yeah. And it's not only a family story. I mean, you've got the odyssey of the family and of individuals, and it's also a mystery. It's amazing how you included so much into this one book. And I know that you probably went through editing quite a few times, but I'm wondering, how many pieces of sticky notes did you use to try to figure out which family goes to which? And
a forest's worth maybe no, I'm just kidding. I used all recycled paper in this process, but no, it was an enormous amount of work just from the research perspective, but then also tinkering with the various time periods to get them to agree with one another was also a massive undertaking and required a lot of editorial help for me to get it to prune it down. I'm going to use a lot of tree metaphors. This is just part of
fine.
To prune it down to a manageable size, but also the propulsiveness of the story that you highlighted and the mystery element were something that I really knew that I both needed to do but also wanted to do, because I love those books that are both deep and page turning and compelling, and driving a reader through 520 pages is not always an easy feat, and so it was important for me to do that.
Right. So this is a couple questions in one. So you do you have a lot of research that you've had to do, a lot of reading.
Yes.
And in the last couple of, you wrote this before COVID, but where do you get a lot of your information? How do you find that?
That's a really great question. And I should say, first of all, that I work almost exclusively in a little 10 by 10 cabin that we have on our property that doesn't have internet, is beyond the reach of Wi-Fi. And that's actually a critically important part of my writing process, is to get outside of the digital torrent of information so that my imagination can take over. And so while I do some online research, I really try to stick to particularly firsthand account type information. So I was doing a lot of requests from libraries, which I love, in the Lower Mainland, and I also did numerous interviews as well, with firsthand interviews with folks who participated in stuff like the environmental movement in the Pacific Northwest, or I interviewed a carpenter who makes violas, which I we'll talk about later, I think. So it's very important, I think, as a writer and I've learned this through lots of trial and error, to know where to look for information, and then to not get overwhelmed by it, because research can really swallow you whole if you're not careful.
Wow. So in your 10 by 10 writer's cabin, do you handwrite everything or do you type?
I have a kind of a weird sort of cyclical digital to analog process where I take a lot of notes in a notebook. So this field guide is I've already got some notes in
Good,
it.
yeah,
It's beautiful. I love
great.
it. Right up my alley. And so I take a lot of physical notes, put it into the computer, try to organize it, print it out, mark that up, put it back in the computer, and there's sort of this digital analog cycle that happens, which really helps me see the work in a way that I don't see it when it's just existing on a screen.
That's great. That's great. So viola. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I'm a cellist. What can I say? But it reminded me of the viola reminded me of the band Dead Can Dance, and they got their name from instruments that were trees that died and then became alive again as they were being played for music. So
I did not know that. I listened
Yay.
to Dead Can Dance in the 90s though, so I can
oh
claim
yeah,
that. But I didn't know the roots of their name. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so that's so true for our musical instruments, our dining tables that we surround and talk amongst, and your book. It's all wood. And some of it's hard to kind of think about. It's like, wow, you know, this was a tree, this was a living being.
Yeah, and I mean that's particular. I mean that's a theme of the novel. You know, this duality that exists, where trees standing are so beautiful and so essential to not only the climate, but also to just our well-being and our mental well-being and our physical well-being. But then also when we cut them down and put them to good use, to make instruments, to put on our floors, to make heirloom furniture, not coffee stir sticks so much, but
No.
then wood is also incredibly special and somehow human material as well, and when we put it to use. So that's something that the book engages with. And while I was writing it, I mean, trees are so close to our experience. Once you start realizing what's made of wood and you see wood everywhere, it becomes almost like a green lens that I was looking through. And that was one of the joys of writing the book, was realizing that we leaf through pages and that that rivers branch, all of that, all those wonderful parts of our speech that have originated from our deep love of forests and trees.
Yeah, it's true. I do know as a cellist, I pretty much hug my instrument every time I play it, and I do feel the wood, and it warms up as I'm touching it, and it almost does become it is a living thing when I play it. I mean, not my playing, but the instrument itself.
and as a carpenter, I can tell you that if they created a building material that was better than wood, I don't think I would want to use it. I mean, just the plastic or whatever it would be just would not have that same I don't know, just emotional connection. And there are details in the novel about carpentry, which were kind of hard won by me during my work with wood. And I love the fact that wood, there's a quote in the book that you can lay it straight, but after you're done, wood lives on, and it has a mind of its own, and it can, even after years of being in place, can warp and twist and make new decisions. So I find that really fascinating.
That is fascinating. So going back to some of the characters in the book, did you base the characters of the two brothers on anybody you know?
Yeah, I mean, though I wouldn't have understood it at the time, I do have an older brother, and who is a business guy. He's a banking executive, and I think I drew upon our relationship, which has become very, very close in recent years, and to develop those brothers. But I also will say that books like East of Eden were really influential. And as well, I mean, it's an almost biblical kind of pairing as well, Cain and Abel. And, I
Right.
think the book really taps into many kind of sort of more mythic structures, I guess, just because of the resonance of the trees and wasn't something I realized at the time, but I figured it out later.
Wow, that's great. So there's also a complex relationship between Harris and Feeney.
Yes.
And for whomever, if you were out there and you have not read the book yet, we're maybe giving a few things away. So
Sorry.
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 Yeah, there you go. But Harris is, how did you get the characters? Well, first of all, twofold question. You've got this actually beautiful relationship that Harris doesn't have with anyone else. And I really enjoyed reading about the two of them and Feeney's his way of helping so much. I mean, and his calmness through it, because Harris just seemed to be a little bit about ready to pop at all times. But he was blind, which was so interesting. And I don't know, well, how did you have, I don't know, I'm asking you, how did you think about the fact that here's somebody who's blind, but still going forward with everything he was doing, and then was able to have the support of this one person to help him through everything? I don't know if I'm asking the question right, but.
No, I totally,
Okay.
that the Feeney and Harris's relationship turned out to be one of the most moving for me relationships in the novel, and their love, and particularly Harris's visual challenge, him being blind, was something that came fairly early in the book, and I felt like it really humanized him in ways, because I really didn't want, I was writing about a timber tycoon, right? Someone who cuts down millions and millions of old growth trees. This is a villainous character in many of our contemporary minds. But I wanted him to be doing it for reasons of his own. And I wanted him to not be, twisting his mustache and, planning the demise of nature, and so I loved this idea. And then when I came up with the idea that Feeney would become his describer, and would describe the world to him, and meet this need for intimacy, I think, that Harris had but didn't acknowledge within himself. That to me seemed like a nearly perfect metaphor for love. Finding someone to describe the world to you. I couldn't imagine a better way to look at it. So I mean, yeah, that really, I don't know where it came from, but once I came up with that relationship, and really kind of wrote my way into it, it developed into something that I was very moved by personally and very proud of. Yeah.
Oh, it was a beautiful relationship. Yeah. So you do write about J.D. Rockefeller. Is it a little bit nerve-wracking to write about a real person amongst all the fiction?
Yeah, I mean, I love to weave fact and fiction. I mean, a lot of writers do this, but it was fun, especially with a book of such large scope, that takes place not only in Canada, but also in New York State and Connecticut and Japan as well. And so I liked the idea of weaving in these characters, particularly these kind of robber baron type characters like J.D. Rockefeller and the timber tycoons like Weyerhaeuser and H.R. Macmillan. So yeah, I wasn't too worried that about that, but I will say that I called the Holt character, who's a very wealthy man who owns much of the province of New Brunswick. I originally called him Irving, R.J. Irving. And in fact, the Irvings own all of New Brunswick in real life, and they own the gas stations, they own oil production, they own grocery stores. Like it's almost an oligarch. They own media as well, and
Oh.
then they're also incredibly litigious, meaning they sue often and aggressively. And so right up until the end of the novel's journey towards publication, it made it through editorial, it made it through copy editing, This Name Irving, and all the way up to proofreading. And someone alerted my publisher to the fact that this guy was called Irving. And so my editor called me and she was like, do you know that there's an Irving on the East? And I said, yeah, I do know. And she said, hold on, I got to call you back. And then my phone rang and I picked it up and it was like, hi, Michael, this is the legal counsel of Penguin Random House. We need to talk, kind of thing. So I had to change the name. And, you know, the character really doesn't bear much resemblance anyway. So, but it was just a decision. So yes, when you are writing about real people and when you are blending fact with fiction, get a lawyer, maybe.
Get
I
a
don't know if that's
lawyer,
the, yeah.
right? Oh
That's right.
man, I'm so glad that someone figured that out.
I know, me too. Yeah.
So Temple is the female that gives the most mothering in the whole book, and
Yes.
yet she's not a mother. Amongst and then you worked with displaced and homeless people in Vancouver at one point. Was there a Temple that you had met who was someone you based her off of, or?
Yeah, I mean, there were many temples
Yeah.
down there and in the downtown east side, which is where I worked in Vancouver. And yeah, I mean, with her character particularly, I wanted to push against stereotypes. I think particularly in Canadian literature, there's like a farm-bound spinster type woman character who's waiting for a man to come and save her from this dusty farm, and I really didn't want to write that.
No.
And I, loved the idea of portraying a person who'd chosen not to have children, and that to be a rational, that to be a reasonable decision. And so, I kind of fell in love with Temple from early on. But particularly her farm. She does this thing, for those of you who haven't read the book, where she puts a table out on her porch. And then when she has dinner inside, she'll also set another meal out on the porch for anyone who is in need to come and eat. And that was actually a real detail that I discovered when I was reading about the Great Depression on the prairies in Canada. And I just found that as the table on the porch, just such an incredible metaphor for generosity and kind of unjudgmental generosity and unselfish generosity, if you know what I mean. It's not a look at me, look how great I am thing. It's just real, true giving. And I found it very moving. So I wanted to incorporate all that into the book.
Sorry. And that's so beautiful, and yet people still judged her even though she's doing all of this. It's like, come on.
Of course. I mean, and when I was at the homeless shelter, I mean, we were getting our funding cut, and it's interesting to see that the stigma against being poor. I think this book is also about poverty, and it's about judgment in some cases, and so she would have faced that doing what she was doing as well.
Yeah, you bring there's quite a few homeless moments in the book. I mean, even Willow was homeless. I mean, she had her band, but if you asked her son, he sure would tell you they were homeless.
And I've noticed this as a theme throughout all my work. Now that I've written 3 books of this, people searching for homes, people building homes, people leaving homes, people finding new homes. And it's a real constant theme, and it's all over Greenwood. People are building cabins and they're purchasing houses and they're leaving, and so it's a theme that I'm emotionally invested in, I suppose.
Yeah, and we appreciate that you write about it, because it's everywhere. So thank you. When you're writing, do you focus on writing one book at a time, or do you have lots of projects? Or lots of thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
Not many of them are useful, I've learned. But I generally will have one major fiction project. I'm kind of able to change gears and write a short story sort of here and there, but I generally will be on one big fiction piece. But recently I've been doing TV related work with respect to Greenwood and turning it into a limited TV series. So I've had to
That's
kind of,
exciting.
yeah. And so I have to kind of change gears more than
Sure.
I'm used to, but it's been fun. And I find that the mediums are quite different. So it's
Oh,
it's
sure,
an
yeah.
okay transition. Yeah.
So your wife is also an author, and she also has the beautiful name of Cedar. Just really works out, doesn't it?
I met her before I wrote the tree book. I just want to say that she came first. Yeah.
That's great. But she's an author in her own right, and she
Yes.
has a book, Astra, that just came out. That's also long listed for the Geller Prize. So
Yes.
well done, you guys.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I am not playing Scrabble with you two because. But you also have two kids. So how do you guys figure out how you can focus on writing and you're creative and make dinner?
I mean, we often use the metaphor of like a blanket that is about a foot too small for your body. And sometimes it's got to cover your chest, and sometimes you got to cover your feet, and we sort of just move it around to whoever is cold at that particular time. But it's a real juggling act. But we've made many decisions, some of them not very good financial decisions, to prioritize time, getting time to do our work, and that goes for both of us. So we are very generous with one another, and we really try to carve out spaces for each of us to dedicate to our work, because that's something that I've learned more and more, that it's so hard to find the time to really sink into a fiction project and get your mind into that world, and then to stay in that world with the cacophonous reality,
Right.
sucking you back constantly. So we really, that's kind of our main priority, as well as our kids, of course. But yeah,
of course. But well done. I mean, that's a lot of juggling. So well done.
Thank you.
And so you do live on a small but very long island, and
Yes.
and it's very quiet and secluded. And so how you feeling with all this publicity and public life? And
It's great. I how can I say, I'm an introvert by nature, as I think many readers are. It's not always true, I think, but I love to spend quiet time with people in my head. That's one of my favorite things to do, is to read and to just think, and be alone, as many readers here are, I'm sure. And so, but I do appreciate the public aspect of this job, and I can kind of turn it on and do it and put on a face and get through it and enjoy it. But afterwards, I always end up kind of collapsing and retreating back into my little tiny quiet world in the trees. So it's fun. I think without the public side of writing, it would be a lot less kind of real and joyful. So it's really fun to meet readers and bookstore owners like yourself.
Thanks.
Yes.
I have a wonderful job. I'm very, very lucky. And living on an island with two boys, it must be just lots of fun, just being out playing in the trees and the water, and away from internet for the kids too. That must be really great to watch them grow.
Yes. There's always this balance between, are we isolating them from, say, culture or from popular culture or from, the fun stuff, or are
Right.
we providing them with these great, meaningful experiences, and it's
Right.
always, so we try to strike a balance, I think, between the two. And, but I will say that one of our sons basically grew up on the island from the time he was a baby till he was 6, didn't really leave that much, but it's just because he went on trips and stuff. And there was one point when he saw a traffic light and we were driving and was like, what's that?
Oh, no.
And my wife and I were like, it's a traffic light. And he's like, what does it do? And we had to explain it to him. And he was old at this point because the island has no
Right.
traffic control of any kind, right? It's just dirt roads, basically. So that was a real kind of wake up moment for us, just in the sense that we were like, wow, what else doesn't he know? Like, this is a very interesting environment that he's growing up in. But I mean, he does know, he can identify trees, he knows which plants are edible, he
Right.
knows his way around the island. So it can be a bit of a trade-off, I think, but we
Yeah.
we try to inhabit both worlds.
Right. Yeah, I lived on the island very close, the next ferry stop from
Yes.
from you, from Michael. And there on that island, if there were signs throughout Main Island that if there's somebody standing at the sign, you had to pick them up if you had a car, and they didn't. So trying to explain that to my daughter when we get back to the mainland, it's like, you don't just pick everybody up that's standing out on the sidewalk.
Right.
It's very different, but boy,
It-
it's just living in that small community, really, you really had to support each other a lot more. And that's a very valuable thing to experience.
Absolutely. And
Need
there are
for
certainly
others.
downsides to it, but it's also, pretty amazing to get to know folks who I never would have met in the city,
Right,
in
right.
a real way. And people bring me fruit all the time. Just,
Yay!
you
That's
cannot lose with that. That is an amazing thing. So we love it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, we are getting close to the end, but I have a lightning round for you.
Okay.
I think these are always fun. Okay, ready?
Yes.
Favorite tree?
Cedar.
Good. Well, that's a good answer. Favorite band?
Oh man. Favorite band ever?
Ever.
Rolling Stones.
Awesome. Okay. Favorite place to chill and reflect?
Right outside my house on
Cool.
my deck.
Favorite dessert?
Not really a dessert guy. Blueberries, my favorite.
Good answer. Good
Love
answer.
blueberries.
See, mine would have been French fries. It's not really a dessert, but man, can't keep those away. Your favorite skateboard trick?
The kickflip.
Okay. And your favorite book as a kid?
Oh, I loved Super Fudge
Yeah, I did too.
so much. I loved
Sure
Super
love that
Fudge.
book.
Oh, I loved it.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that with me.
Thank you, Kelly. Oh, that was great. I could do that all day.
Okay. Well, I think that's it for the two of us. There's Claire. Claire is back.
Here I am. Okay, so to piggyback on the skateboarding question, for
Yes.
everybody, for anybody who doesn't know that Michael used to be an aspiring professional skateboarder, I actually have a question for you, which is, have you ever met Tony Hawk, Steve Caballero, or Colin McKay?
Colin McKay, yes, he's from Vancouver, so I know him somewhat. And I've met Tony Hawk in passing, and never have met Steve Caballero, but I've worn his shoes.
Okay. Oh, okay. Cool.
Literally,
All right.
like worn his shoes.
No, he has like a pro shoe for Vans.
Oh, I see. I get it. Okay.
Yeah,
He was
Not his
the
actual shoe.
one. Yeah, we're all of a similar age, and he is the one that I had the big crush on as a young woman.
Yeah,
Okay,
Tony Hawk.
so
I hear you.
okay. All right. Thank you for spending a little time on the skateboarding with us. So we actually have quite a few questions from the audience. So
Wonderful.
let's And so thank you to all of you who have posed those questions. So Susan, I think, has a very interesting one. She would like to know, what did the quote, "Take heart, the world has been on the brink of ending before," what did that quote mean to you?
So much, that it was there. Yeah. I mean, I wrote that very late in the process of writing the book. And I think it arose from, obviously this book is about climate change, and it's about the unfolding climate disaster that we're facing and that we're not doing a great job of acknowledging. And so, not to diminish that, but especially my research of the Great Depression, but then also, this book covers world wars, and it covers even the 2008 housing crash. So each section of this novel actually highlights a particular financial calamity. And so I got, especially reading about the Depression, it really struck me how resilient people can be when they decide to work collectively, or how catastrophic the First World War must have seemed at the time. And we're seeing this now, of course, in Europe once again. And, not to say that these things aren't terrible, but people have in the past come together and dealt with massive problems. And I really believe that climate change and the accumulation of carbon in our atmosphere is one that we can deal with. I do. And so I think it's good to look to the past for signs of hope, and the resilience of human beings is one of those signs.
Thank you. That's a great answer. And to follow that, another Susan asked, and I think you kind of just answered that a little bit, why were the particular years chosen that you chose for this story, 1908 to 2038?
Yeah, and each one is its own kind of disastrous time in history. And there's a quote in the book about the light and the dark rings of the tree, and also the times of drought that you can see in a tree's structure are thinner rings actually than the wetter years produce wider rings. So I kind of loved the idea that this book took place in these difficult times throughout this family tree's history.
Laura would like to know, she says, several members of my book group felt that the premise of only a single forest in North America surviving environmental disaster was not scientifically believable. She says she disagrees. Did you do research of this concept being environmentally possible for in the future?
I think in the opening it says one of the last remaining. It doesn't say
Yeah,
it is the last
the,
remaining.
right.
And I was pretty careful with that, just because it wouldn't be plausible if there was one remaining forest. But the Great Withering has begun now, and there are Western red cedars on Galliano Island right now, where I live, that are withering and browning and dying due to repeated drought stress. And I thought a lot about the science of the Great Withering, and I really wanted to get away from this idea of a single cause, a particular fungus, or it just being climate zone shifts. I want it to be a much more kind of amorphous cause to demonstrate the incredible interconnectedness of our ecosystems. And we're seeing that now with the effects of climate change. A lot of them are feedback loops, and a lot of them are microclimate things that are happening in particular regions, but they all add up to this enormous change that our planet is undergoing. So I wanted it to be specific, the Great Withering, but also to be kind of terrifyingly difficult to understand.
Okay. All right, now we have a question about some characters. Georgia would, I think that this is something that a lot of people wonder, why didn't Willow and Jake use their fortunes for good, the money that they could have had? Why did they do what they did with their money?
All right. Well, Willow, Willow obviously had very strong ideological beliefs related to rescuing the environment, beliefs that I share, to be honest. But her method of achieving those beliefs was extreme. And I knew that I didn't want her to be like a rescuer, a noble rescuer of the environment with no costs to her decisions. And this is something that I saw in interviewing folks involved in the early environmental movement, is that really, extreme views can sometimes come with great sacrifices with respect to a person's life. And in her case, it was her son. So she resented this fortune. And I think particularly at that time in the 70s, the idea that an enormous amount of money was going to be what saved us was very foreign to someone like Willow. And to her, it was tainted, and she decided that she couldn't touch it. And, that's a decision that I'm not sure if many of us would make, but it made sense for her, I think. Jake's decision to cut down the diseased trees and leave the island is one that readers have lots of thoughts about. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, I didn't want to wrap the book up with a neat bow and have Jake rescue the forest and, the climate disaster is somehow reversed and everything's okay. I mean, I wanted there to be a kind of mirroring with what Jake did in caring for this child that she finds on the mainland, with Everett taking the baby from the tree. I thought there was this really nice resonance between those two events. And there was much question as to whether Jake would actually inherit the arboreal cathedral anyway.
Right.
And I think I cast enough doubt on that through various means to suggest that she probably wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I would like to say as a reader that I'm really glad that you didn't tie everything up nicely with a bow at the end. I enjoy turning the last page and then just spending a lot of time wondering and thinking about it. So thank you for that. And so another sort of character question, Julia is wondering about people in the story like Jake and Willow and her son Liam. Are they written, she says, written for people that you know? Are your characters amalgams of people that you know?
Certainly, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was William Faulkner said that writing is part imagination, part observation, and part there was another one. I'm sorry, I can't forget. I can't remember. But so I draw upon everyone I know and everyone I've met, and particularly Willow. My wife Cedar grew up in a tent until she was aged 10 on Galliano Island, and her parents were back to the landers, and
Okay.
a lot of kids on the island were, and it's a wonderful way to grow up, and also not so wonderful way to grow up. And I think this book is very much about how the ideologies of one generation can cast shadows into the lives of those who come after them. And that's something that I very much experienced in my own life too. And, so these intergenerational relationships and misunderstandings and inheritances are very important to the book. So, yeah, I mean, Temple is modeled after lots of strong women who I know and admire, and Willow is modeled after kind of my mom, I guess, as well.
Okay.
So it's all just a mix.
Patricia, well, actually first, oh, excuse me, I'm knocking my computer around. It's not helpful. So we do have somebody watching who looked this up for us. So a writer needs 3 things: experience, observation, and imagination.
Thank you so much. It's so embarrassing.
Thank you, Mary. Patricia, speaking of characters, Patricia wants to know if you ever miss the characters and revisit them.
I do. I mean, this book in particular, I spent 5 years with these people and these
Mhm.
Greenwoods, in the Greenwoods, and it was hard to let them go. And it's I think that can be a signal that maybe you've done your job as a writer when these characters really take a kind of human, almost a human existence inside your mind, and that's been fun. And actually, though I don't have any plans for a sequel of any kind, this limited TV series process has led me back into engaging with these wonderful people again, and it's been a lot of fun to try to figure out how to translate them to a visual medium.
Well, and that's, thank you for mentioning that, because Bonnie had a question about that. She wants to know if you're doing the screenplay and working closely with the director, and like, are you going to have a lot of participation in that process? I sure would hope so.
I'm going to be an executive producer for the project, so that's good. And I've partnered with another producer and director who's worked on some really great stuff and who I have a lot of faith in, and who's really gets the book. And so, yeah, I will have quite a bit of input, though I'm not going to do the writing. I've realized that
Okay.
10 hours of television is something that I maybe don't want to take a shot at on my first go in the world of screenwriting. So, but I'm going to be pretty intimately involved in the process, which is very important to me.
Great, good. Maybe a cameo.
That would be.
I just learned about Margaret Atwood's cameo in The Handmaid's Tale. I'm sure everybody knows about that, but I just learned about that, and I thought that's wonderful. Just a split second.
I loved it. I cheered. I was like, yes, yeah.
So Barbara, speaking of sort of characters that are based on your family and what you know, Barbara is wondering if there were loggers or timber people in your family.
Yeah.
Family history.
Yeah. My grandfather was a carpenter who built his own house in Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Okay.
And who's really was kind of the foundation for Everett as well. He's a World War II veteran, a very quiet guy, spent a lot of time in his basement tinkering with things and building things. And I would go over and visit him, and he was who showed me how to use tools, and who kind of taught me this sort of methodical way of working that is pretty necessary to carpentry. So yeah, him for sure. And then my dad worked at the pulp and paper mill that was near our house, that we could smell constantly in Thunder Bay, which I wouldn't recommend. And so, yeah, and on the island as well, I have one of my best friends is a logger or tree service guy. I'm very much involved in that world.
Oh, okay, good. Let's see, I think maybe I have time for one more here. Linda says, I just read the first chapter of The Beggar's Garden. The style and the voice is so different from Greenwood. Did the storyline and characters of that book come from your work in The Shelters? P.S. I love that chapter and will continue to read it in the rest of your work. Thank you for the writing and all you're doing.
Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah, that was my first book, is my first book. And yes, it did. I mean, I worked for 8 years in a homeless shelter, and it's sort of known as Canada's poorest postal code. And, you know, the shelter that I worked at served people who were mentally ill and or had substance use or misuse issues. And so after I was finished working there and I burned out and couldn't really process a lot of what I saw there, I wrote that book. And, you know, a lot of those experiences went into The Beggar's Garden. But The Beggar's Garden is also very much about Vancouver. It's about class, and it's about the fact that Vancouver has some of the most expensive real estate in the world, right up against kind of a real urban poverty, and it's a
Right.
very strange juxtaposition. So hopefully, hope you like it. Thanks for reading the backlist.
Which we do have signed copies of, by the way, at Village Books. Thank you for signing all those copies. I think that about wraps up our hour. I do want to have a little bit of time left to really say thank you, Michael, for sharing Greenwood with us. It was such a wonderful platform around which to create this series of programming, and then culminating in these events with you. We really appreciate it. So,
well, and thank you for choosing it, and Kelly, thank you for recognizing it across the room.
Thank you.
and I want to say too, you know, this book has been wonderfully embraced by the people of Whatcom County, and I think it's kind of its perfect home, just in the themes and all the stories that I've heard from readers who have been connected to logging, who love forests, who love trees, and it's just been an incredible experience for me to find my perfect readers.
Yeah, well, we really do appreciate everything you've done this week. You're extremely talented, and it's just so wonderful to read your stories. So
Thanks,
can't wait
Kelly.
for the next one.
Me too.
and there is a next one, isn't there? There is a next one, right?
There is, yes.
Yay. Good. Okay.
Yes.
It exists.
We can all look forward to that. And I do want to say thank you to all of the Whatcom Reads organizers, everybody who's watching right now who had a hand in this series. This was truly one of the best Whatcom Read series that we've had so far. And I, as just a reader and a civilian in Whatcom County, I have enjoyed it immensely, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And I know that Village Books is too. So I think I would love it if we could, just in case anybody didn't get the news last night, if you weren't at the Mount Baker Theater, or if you you haven't checked social media or the Whatcom Reads website yet, maybe there are people in the audience who do not know what the next Whatcom Reads selection is for 2023. So pretend you hear a drum roll, and I'm just going to share my screen so that everyone can see who we are going to welcome in 2023. And we are pleased. Kelly, do you want to say a little bit about this?
The Cold Millions, Jess Walters. I think he believes he lives in Spokane. Wonderful writer, and he's just a great heart, and he's going to be just so fun to listen to. So, Michael, you pass the baton on to Jess, and I'm looking forward to 2023.
Gladly. I'm a huge fan of Jess, so yeah, I can see why you picked it.
Yeah.
And just in case anyone is interested in seeing an event with Jess soon, we are actually hosting a virtual event with him on Monday night. He is going to be a conversation partner for Karen Joy Fowler at 7 p.m. Another virtual event. She's presenting her new book, Booth, but it can give you an idea of what's in store for us for the year. So Michael, again, thank you so much. Kelly, thank you for being our interviewer today. And thanks everybody for coming today. I think this is where we say goodbye.
Sadly.
Goodbye.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.